Hi everyone, welcome back to KG Graves, the one-on-one series. This is a special one for me, being a Beatles fan. Sir George Martin, their manager. It's took a while to find this grave and this cemetery. I hope you appreciate it. As usual, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Here's more information about George. Thanks for watching.
Beatles recording manager George Martin is another manipulator of sound. He's encouraged the Beatles to experiment in some recent sessions.
Tape and electronics have brought an enormous new field to music. It's surprising what you can do once you have a sound recorded on tape. You can speed it up, you can slow it down, you can turn it round back to front, you can compress it, equalize it, add echo. There's a whole range of things you can do, which it would be obviously far too complicated to describe to you in detail. But take the sound of an ordinary cymbal, for example. Have a listen to this. Now, have you heard it backwards?
This is number 56, Sir George Martin, at All Saints churchyard in Coleshill, Oxfordshire. George Henry Martin was born on the 3rd of January 1926 in Highbury, London. He was an English record producer, arranger, composer, conductor and musician. He was commonly referred to as the fifth Beatle because of his extensive involvement in each of the Beatles' original albums. At the age of 6, George's family acquired a piano that sparked his interest in music. At 8, he persuaded his parents that he should take piano lessons, but those ended after only 6 lessons because of a disagreement between his mother and the teacher. George created his first piano composition, The Spider's Dance, at age 8. He continued to learn piano on his own through his youth, building a working knowledge of music theory through his natural perfect pitch. He led and played piano in a dance band called the Fortune Tellers. His occupations included working as a carpenter, quantity surveyor, and later for the War Office as a temporary clerk. In 1943, at the age of 17, George volunteered for the Fleet Air Arm of the Royal Navy. On the 26th of July 1945, shortly after receiving his officer commission, he appeared on BBC Radio for the first time during a Royal Navy variety show, playing a self-composed piano piece. George attended the Guildhall School of Music and Drama from 1947 to 1950. As well as studying piano, he took courses in music composition and orchestration. After graduating, he worked for the BBC's classical music department, also earning money as an oboe player in local bands. In 1953, George produced Ron Goodwin's first record, an instrumental cover of Charlie Chaplin's theme from Limelight, which made it to number 3 on the British charts. George joined EMI in November 1960, managing Parlophone's classical records catalogue. He signed Ron Goodwin to a recording contract. In April 1955, George was 29 and given total control of the Parlophone label. He signed singer Dick James, later the music publisher for both the Beatles and Elton John, to a recording contract, and reached number 14 with Dick James' theme from The Adventures of Robin Hood. George became the first British A&R man to capitalise on the 1956 skiffle boom when he signed the Vipers Skiffle Group, reaching number 10 on the UK charts in 1957 with Don't You Rock Me Daddy-O. Also in 1957, he signed Jim Dale, who achieved success as a teen idol, reaching number 2 on the chart with Be My Girl. George's first British number 1 came in May 1961 with the Temperance Sevens, You're Driving Me Crazy. Also that year, he produced Humphrey Lyttelton's version of Saturday Jump, which became the theme tune of the influential BBC radio programme Saturday Club, and scored a success at number 14 in the charts with Charlie Drake's novelty record, My Boomerang Won't Come Back. Next came 2 top 10 hits in 1962 with Bernard Cribbens's The Hole in the Ground and Right Said Fred. By late 1962, George had established a strong working relationship with Brian Epstein, the Beatles' manager. George met with Brian Epstein on the 9th of May 1962 at EMI Studios in London and informed him he would give the Beatles a standard recording contract with Parlophone to record a minimum of 6 tracks in the first year. The royalty rate was to be 1 penny for each record sold on 85% of records, which was to be split among the 4 members and Epstein. They agreed to hold the Beatles' first recording date on the 6th of June 1962. He was not happy with drummer Pete Best and consequently replaced him with Ringo Starr. Brian Epstein also managed several other Liverpool music acts, and soon these acts began recording with George. When he visited Liverpool in December 1962, Brian showed him successful local acts like Jerry and the Pacemakers and The Foremost. Jerry and the Pacemakers scored their first #1 with their version of How Do You Do It in April 1963. The group's next 2 singles, I Like It and You'll Never Walk Alone, also reached #1, earning the group the distinction of being the first British act to have their first 3 singles top the charts. George also produced Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas, whose first single was a cover of the Beatles' Do You Want to Know a Secret, which hit #2 in the charts, followed by 2 UK #1s in 63 and 64, Bad to Me, also a Lennon-McCartney original, and Little Children. Kramer also reached #4 with another Lennon-McCartney song in 1964, I'll Keep You Satisfied. George began work with The Foremost in summer 1963 with a cover of one of John Lennon's earliest songs, Hello Little Girl, that reached #9. Their follow-up, released in November, was another Lennon-McCartney work, I'm in Love, which reached the top 20. It was also agreed to sign the Beatles' Cavern Club associate, Cilla Black. Her first record was Love of the Loved. The record was only a minor hit, reaching #35. This was followed in 1964 with 2 #1 hits, Anyone Who Had a Heart and You're My World. Anyone Who Had a Heart was the top-selling British single by a female artist in the 1960s. In December 1964, Jerry and the Pacemakers released Ferry Cross the Mersey. George also produced many comedy records featuring some famous celebrities, including Peter Sellers, Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, and the Goons, to name a few. In August 1965, George left EMI due to a disagreement with the management, pay and contractual conditions. He recruited many of EMI's staff to his own company. He named it Associated Independent Records, AIR. Artists associated with his new production team included Adam Faith, Manfred Mann, Peter and Gordon, The Hollies, Tom Jones and Engelbert Humperdinck. George's departure from EMI and foundation of an independent production company was major news in the music press, with the NME calling it shock to the recording industry. EMI attempted to lure him back, but he rejected them. Throughout the 60s to the 80s, he produced other artists which moved to AIR. These included Cilla Black, David and Jonathan, Matt Monro, Rolf Harris, Ron Goodwin and The Scaffold, which featured Paul McCartney's brother Mike McGear. Other artists George worked with were Celine Dion, Kenny Rogers, Neil Sedaka, The King's Singers, Jeff Beck, John Williams, Ultravox, UFO, Cheap Trick, The Little River Band, America and many, many more. In 1979, George opened Air Montserrat, a studio on the Caribbean island of Montserrat. This studio was destroyed by Hurricane Hugo 10 years later. He also produced Candle in the Wind 1997, Elton John's tribute single to the late Diana, Princess of Wales, which topped charts around the world in September 1997 and became the best-selling British single of all time. It was also George's final production of a single. He served as a consultant to the June 2002 Party at the Palace at Buckingham Palace Garden for the Queen's Golden Jubilee. Throughout his career, George produced film scores too, some of which were A Hard Day's Night, 1964, Ferry Across the Mersey, 1965, Yellow Submarine, 1968, Live and Let Die, 1973, and many more. In his personal life, George married his first wife, Jean Sheena Chisholm, on the 3rd of July 1948 in Aberdeen, Scotland, against his mother Bertha's wishes. Bertha died 3 weeks later of a brain hemorrhage. They had 2 children, Alexis, born 1953, and Gregory Paul, born 1957. By the early 1960s, George sought divorce, but Sheena refused, citing her childcare needs. By this time, George had moved out and rented a small flat in central London, which he shared with his widowed father for the time. Their divorce was finalised in February 1965. George met Judy Lockhart Smith on his first day of work at EMI Studios in 1950, when she served as secretary to the Parlophone director, Oscar Prius. He chose to retain her as secretary when he assumed direction of Parlophone in 1955, and they commuted together each day. They began a discreet affair in late 1950s and eventually married on the 24th of June 1966 at the Marylebone Registry Office. They had 2 children, Lucy born 1967 and Giles born 1969. There is no doubt that George was an amazing producer, respected by many in the music industry, especially where the Beatles were concerned. His son Giles has now continued in the field of work his father did. George produced 30 #1 singles and 16 #1 albums in the UK charts, and 23 #1 singles and 19 #1 albums in the US. He also won many Grammy and Brit Awards, among others. He was appointed a CBE in 1988 and knighted in 1996. George was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame on the 15th of March 1999 and into the UK Music Hall of Fame on the 14th of November 2006. In 2004 he was granted a coat of arms with the Latin motto Amore Solum Opus Est, which translates to All You Need Is Love. George died in his sleep on the night of the 8th of March 2016 at his home in Wiltshire at the age of 90. His death was announced by Ringo Starr on his Twitter account. The cause of his death was not immediately disclosed, though biographer Kenneth Womack subsequently wrote that George had battled stomach cancer. Let's see where his grave is located. And here we have the final resting place of Sir George Martin. Thank you, George, for all the amazing work you did with the Beatles. Still the best band in the world. So, there you have it, the grave of Sir George Martin, record producer, arranger, composer, conductor and musician. If you have enjoyed watching this video, then please like, subscribe and hit the bell for more content like this. Thank you for watching, see you on the next one.